Have you ever stopped to think how many times someone has been ignored in front of you as if they simply didn't exist? Not by chance, not out of distraction, but because someone silently decided that that person didn't deserve to be seen. Now imagine this scenario in an environment where power, luxury, and status speak louder than any name. That's exactly where this story begins. And what you're about to discover may surprise you more than you imagine. The place was sophisticated, the kind where the air feels heavy and every detail is designed to impress. Well-dressed people, attentive gazes, strategic smiles. When the billionaire entered, everything changed. Conversations ceased for a few seconds, bodies turned almost automatically, and respect arose even before any words were spoken. He was the kind of presence that didn't need to announce itself. He walked with the certainty of someone accustomed to being noticed, heard, and obeyed. For him, that space was familiar. It was where his name carried weight, where his reputation spoke before any action. But amidst this carefully constructed scene, there was someone almost no one noticed. A black woman, sitting discreetly with a firm posture and attentive gaze, but without any attempt to draw attention. There was nothing extravagant about her appearance, nothing that screamed power or authority to the most superficial eyes. And perhaps that's why she became invisible. Have you ever experienced this? Have you ever felt as if your presence was simply ignored, even though you were there, occupying the same space? The billionaire walked past her without even slowing his pace. There was no greeting, no acknowledgement, not even that quick glance that confirms the other person's existence. It was as if she were part of the decor. Small gestures say a lot, and at that moment, every detail revealed something bigger, the arrogance that arises when someone believes that money puts them above everyone else. It wasn't a direct attack. It wasn't explicit humiliation. It was something even more common and painful, silent contempt. While he was greeted with compliments and forced smiles, she remained there, observing everything. The contrast was almost uncomfortable. On one side, the figure who symbolized success, influence, and status. On the other, someone who seemed to have no importance whatsoever in that social game. And it is precisely in this type of situation that stories of reverse humiliation begin to unfold, even if no one notices at first. The most curious thing is that her silence didn't draw attention, but it carried something difficult to explain. There was no embarrassment on her face, nor explicit anger, just calm. A calm that seemed out of place in that environment where everyone was competing for validation. Stay with me until the end of this story, because every detail matters, and nothing here happens by chance. Perhaps you've seen something similar, someone being underestimated, ignored, treated as irrelevant simply because of their appearance or the position they seem to hold. This happens every day, everywhere, in companies, events, elevators, meeting rooms. The difference is that most of the time, no one stays to see what happens next. No one imagines that that silent, seemingly insignificant encounter could carry the beginning of a powerful social upheaval. While the billionaire walked confidently, certain that he controlled the environment, the woman remained there, invisible to the wrong eyes, but fully aware of everything around her. And it is precisely at this point that the story begins to gain a silent tension. Because when someone is ignored without reason, time usually takes its toll. And the next step in this story will reveal why underestimating someone can be a costly mistake. And perhaps that's exactly why this story is so unsettling. Because on some level, it's not just about a billionaire or that specific woman. It's about all of us. About how many times we've been judged before being heard. About how many times someone has decided who deserved respect with just a quick glance. While that scene seemed ordinary to an outside observer, something deeper was being built there, even if no one realized it yet. If this part of the story has already triggered a memory in you, if at any point you felt invisible, diminished, or underestimated, it's worth pausing for a few seconds and reflecting on it. If this topic resonates with you, leave. a comment below about what has touched you the most so far. Sharing your experience isn't just a way to vent, it's a way to show that you're not alone and that many other people go through similar situations every day. When you comment, you transform that story into something collective. Someone will read your account and recognize themselves in it. Someone will realize that what you experienced wasn't an exaggeration, wasn't weakness. And that creates a real human connection that goes far beyond the video. Similarly, when you like this content, you help this message reach further, to reach people who might need to hear exactly this right now. This channel only exists because of this exchange. Your participation here is what makes this space grow and reach more people with stories of poetic justice, social upheavals, and moments when arrogance finds its own limits. And if you feel that this type of narrative needs to continue being told, subscribing is a silent but powerful way of saying, I want to follow along, I want to be a part of it. Meanwhile, the scene continues, the atmosphere remains elegant, the conversations resume their superficial tone, and the billionaire remains self-assured, unaware that this silent encounter holds much more than it appears. The woman, still discreet, continues observing, noting every detail, every gesture, every omission. Because some stories don't explode in the first moment, some grow in silence, until the exact instant when everything changes. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject because it is precisely here that the story ceases to be merely uncomfortable and begins to reveal something much greater. Until that moment, the contempt had been silent, almost invisible to those who don't pay attention to the details. But there is a point where certain people, emboldened by power and their own sense of superiority, feel they can go further. And that is exactly what happened. The billionaire didn't just ignore her. He chose to cross a line. Coldness turned to irony. The neutral tone gave way to dry comments, laden with a false nonchalance that usually hides contempt. It wasn't a direct attack, but it was clear enough for anyone who knows how to hear what isn't said aloud. It was as if he were absolutely certain that none of it would have any impact. After all, in his logic, people like her had no voice, no influence, no consequences. He spoke with the confidence of someone who had always come out unscathed. Each word was accompanied by a slight knowing smile, the kind that doesn't apologize because it never believed it was wrong. To him, that woman was just another disposable presence among so many others. Someone who should accept the treatment she received without questioning, without reacting, without existing beyond that minimal space granted to her. And the most intriguing thing of all wasn't his behavior. It was her reaction, or rather, her lack thereof. She didn't respond. She didn't defend herself. Her expression didn't change. She didn't try to prove anything. She remained there, firm, silent, like someone who understands something the other person can't yet see. And it's precisely this kind of silence that leaves people disconcerted later when the truth comes out. Because in situations like this, confrontation is expected. Revolt, justification, explanation are expected. But she offered none of that. And that detail changes everything. Her silence wasn't submission. It was control. It was choice. She was someone who knew the inner workings of her own journey and knew exactly where she stood. While he believed he was winning a dispute that only existed in his head, she observed, evaluated, and made decisions on a completely different level. This type of scene reveals a lot about mindset. It reveals how some people confuse money with moral authority, wealth with human value. It also reveals how others understand that they don't need to react to every provocation because they know that certain responses don't need to be immediate to be definitive. There is a silent transformation that happens when someone realizes they don't need to explain themselves to someone who doesn't have all the information. Explicit contempt at this point becomes almost a strategic error because he believed that attitude wouldn't leave a mark, that no one would remember, that nothing would come back to haunt him. But some experiences are not forgotten. They become part of an internal journey, of a careful reading of who is who, of how people act when they think they are on top. And perhaps that's what makes this story so powerful. It's not about shouting louder, it's about understanding the real impact of choices. Every word spoken there, every glance, every gesture of superiority, everything was kept as a hidden truth, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. While he continued confidently, certain that nothing could touch him, she already saw beyond that moment. She already understood the weight of what was happening. There's something deeply symbolic about someone believing they're in control when, in reality, they're just exposing themselves. Her silence acted like a mirror he didn't realize was right before his eyes. A mirror that reflected not who she was, but who he was showing himself to be. And in stories like this, that kind of revelation never goes unpunished. The atmosphere remained the same, seemingly stable. But something had changed. Not out of place, but within the invisible dynamic between those two people. He moved on as if he had won yet another irrelevant interaction. She remained there, unhurried, silent, carrying with her all the information he never imagined mattered. And it is at this point that the narrative begins to gain another layer, deeper, more strategic, even more silent. Before continuing, write a simple sentence in the comments that represents this moment for you. That makes sense to me. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because this is exactly where many people are mistaken when looking at this scene from the outside. Her silence wasn't emptiness. It wasn't fear. It wasn't acceptance. It was presence. It was someone fully aware of what was happening, carefully choosing each step of her own journey. While the environment continued its automatic rhythm, she slowed down internally, observing everything around her with almost surgical attention. Her posture didn't change. Firm shoulders, controlled breathing, attentive gaze. There was no hurry, no nervousness. Anyone paying attention notices the enormous difference between someone who remains silent because they have no choice and someone who remains silent because they know exactly what they are doing. She belonged to the second group. Every word spoken by the billionaire, every gesture of contempt, every decision made without thinking about the consequences was registered as valuable information. Nothing went unnoticed. There is a silent strength in those who understand the inner workings of their own history. She didn't need to prove anything at that moment. She didn't need to convince anyone, because some truths don't need to be proclaimed to be real. They simply await the right moment to reveal themselves. And this kind of mindset is often frightening when it finally comes to light, precisely because it makes no noise while it grows. While he believed he was in control of the situation, she understood the invisible impact of that interaction. She knew that his behavior said much more about him than about her. She also knew that certain people expose themselves when they feel too secure. That's when seemingly small decisions begin to carry enormous weight. That's when the transformation begins to happen, not in the external environment, but within the one who observes with clarity. She remained silent, but not disconnected. On the contrary, she was more present than ever. Every detail became part of an internal construction, a strategic reading of the situation, the tone of his voice, the way the others reacted, who silently agreed, who looked away. All of this composed a larger scenario, a hidden truth that only those who observe calmly can see. This type of control is rarely understood immediately. To many, it seems like passivity, but in practice, it is power. It is choosing not to react emotionally so as not to lose sight of the bigger picture of what is happening. It is understanding that some battles are not won on impulse, but with patience, and this completely changes the dynamics of the game, even if no one realizes it at that moment. The most interesting thing is that the more assertive she became, the more comfortable he grew in his own arrogance. And that's a dangerous combination, because when someone believes they are above any consequence, they tend to let their guard down. They tend to talk too much, act too much, reveal too much. Without knowing it, He was giving away valuable information, opening the door for a clear understanding of who he really was when he thought no one important was watching. She moved forward without revealing anything, without correcting misconceptions, without interrupting the natural flow of things. Because at certain times, allowing someone to continue believing in a distorted version of reality is part of the strategy. It's letting the person themselves construct the scenario that will later turn against them, not out of revenge, but out of consistency with the choices made. The feeling that begins to emerge is clear. That story didn't end there. On the contrary, that was only the beginning of something bigger. A silent movement that began behind the scenes, far from the eyes that only see the surface. Her journey continued on another level, far beyond that encounter, and without realizing it, he had triggered a process he could no longer control. There is something profoundly transformative about recognizing your own worth without needing to announce it, about knowing who you are, regardless of how others see you at that moment. This kind of awareness changes how you see the world, the decisions you make, and the impact you allow yourself to have. And it is precisely this awareness that makes her silence so powerful. The atmosphere remained the same, but the interpretation of the situation had changed. Something was in motion, albeit invisible, something that didn't need to be said to exist. And the more time passed, the clearer it became that this game was far from over. On the contrary, it was merely entering an even more delicate phase where revelations don't happen immediately, but arrive with precision. Before continuing, write in the comments one word that represents this moment for you: control. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because it is here that everything that seemed invisible finally begins to take shape. The scenario changes, but not abruptly. It's an almost imperceptible transition, like those game-changing moments that only make sense after they happen. The atmosphere is still elegant, people are still busy with their own agendas, but there's a different tension in the air. Something is about to be revealed, even if no one knows exactly what. The meeting begins like so many others. Formal, organized, full of rehearsed speeches and decisions that seem to have already been made before any real conversation. The billionaire is comfortable. He sits with the confidence of someone who believes he controls not only the table, but the entire destiny around it. He speaks naturally, offers opinions, suggests paths, always assuming that his word has final weight. And for a few moments, everything goes exactly as he expects, until something changes. It's not a dramatic announcement, nor an exaggerated gesture. It's simple, objective information, delivered at the right moment. A name mentioned, a position cited, a signature projected on the screen, and suddenly the entire room seems to slow down. The woman who until then occupied a discreet place ceases to be merely a silent presence. That ignored, underestimated figure, treated as irrelevant, now becomes the invisible center of all attention. She doesn't stand up theatrically. She doesn't change her tone of voice. She doesn't need to. The truth does that for her. It becomes undeniably clear that she wasn't an ordinary employee. She wasn't just passing through. She was the owner, the boss, the ultimate authority, the person whose decision had a direct impact on everything being discussed there, including and especially the billionaire's own future. The shock doesn't come in the form of words, but of silence. A heavy, awkward silence that speaks volumes more than any exaggerated reaction. The same man who previously spoke with irony now seems to be frantically searching for some neutral expression, some elegant way out that simply doesn't exist, because certain revelations don't allow for shortcuts. They rearrange the entire hierarchy all at once. At that moment, the role reversal is complete. His overconfidence transforms into discomfort. His relaxed posture gives way to calculated rigidity. He realizes too late that all the decisions, all the gestures, and all the words spoken previously now take on a new weight. Every past action returns to his memory like an echo impossible to ignore. The hidden truth is revealed, not as revenge, but as a direct consequence of the choices made. She, on the other hand, remains exactly as she was, serene, attentive, present. There is no explicit satisfaction, nor any need to expose anything beyond what is already evident. Because when someone truly occupies a position of authority, they don't need to reaffirm it. The transformation happens in the environment, in the reactions around them, in the way everyone begins to measure their words more carefully. This moment reveals something profound about mindset and impact. It shows how true power is rarely announced ahead of time, how some journeys are built away from the spotlight, behind the scenes, while others confuse visibility with control. And it also shows how decisions made from ego often exact a high price when reality sets in. The billionaire now understands that it wasn't just social ignorance, it was a strategic error, a misreading, a character flaw perhaps, because underestimating someone doesn't erase who that person is. It only reveals who you are when you think no one important is watching, and that realization is often transformative, albeit painful. The room moves on, the meeting continues, but nothing there is as it once was. The dynamics have changed. The hierarchies have been quietly reorganized. What once seemed solid now appears fragile, and that woman, once invisible, is now recognized not for demanding respect, but because she always deserved it, regardless of who was watching. This type of revelation doesn't end the story. On the contrary, it opens a new layer, deeper, more delicate, where the consequences begin to take shape clearly. Because from that point on, every decision carries a different weight, and every silence begins to mean much more than before. Before continuing, write in the comments one word that represents this moment for you: twist. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because after a revelation like that, what remains is not just the shock of the moment, but the silent echo that spreads far beyond that room. When hierarchies are reversed in this way, something changes within the viewer. Even if they don't say anything aloud, the story ceases to be about who had more money or more apparent power and becomes about mentality, choices, and consequences. There were no screams, no explicit revenge, no public humiliation as many might have expected, and that's precisely where the strength of this story lies. Poetic justice rarely needs to be noisy to be profound. It happens when the truth asserts itself, when reality reveals itself without needing further explanation. The impact comes from the belated understanding of those who believed they were above everything. For the billionaire, that moment represented more than just a passing embarrassment. It represented an internal breakdown, a forced revision of everything he believed about control, influence, and superiority. Suddenly, it became clear that wealth doesn't buy discernment, that status doesn't replace character, and that decisions made based on ego often exact a high price as the journey progresses. For her, it wasn't a victory in the common sense of the word. It was the silent confirmation of something she always knew, that respect doesn't depend on external validation, that her own journey, built behind the scenes, had a weight that didn't need to be announced to exist, and that remaining true to one's own conscience, even when no one seems to be. Watching is a powerful form of personal transformation. This story teaches something that goes beyond that specific encounter. It teaches that every interaction leaves marks, that every gesture of contempt reveals more about the person who performs it than about the person who receives it. It also teaches that underestimating someone is a risky decision because no one carries in their appearance the full complexity of their own journey. There are hidden truths in each person, entire stories, that cannot be contained in a first glance. The feeling that remains is not one of satisfied revenge, but of profound learning. A sense that the world sometimes finds subtle ways to balance things, not out of cruelty, but out of consistency, Because when someone places themselves above others, sooner or later reality finds a way to remind them that everyone shares the same ground. Perhaps that's why this narrative resonates so deeply. Because, on some level, everyone has been on one side, or the other of this dynamic. Everyone has seen someone ignored. Everyone has witnessed decisions made based on appearance, position, or money. And many have realized, too late, that respect cannot be negotiated, bought, or imposed. It is practiced. The story doesn't end there because the lesson continues to resonate. Each person who watched takes away a different reflection, a silent unease, a question that cannot be answered immediately. The true impact happens later, in the small decisions of everyday life, in the way we look at others, in the attention we give to those who seem invisible. And it is precisely at this point that everything connects again. Because stories like this don't exist just to entertain, but to provoke a change of perspective, to remind us that behind every silence there may be control, behind every simple posture there may be authority, and behind every underestimated person there may be a strength that has not yet been fully revealed. Before continuing, write a short sentence in the comments that represents this reflection for you. Respect comes before status. If you've made it this far, it's because this story resonated with you on some level, not just because of what happened, but because of what it awakens within you. And it's precisely this kind of reflection that gives meaning to this space. If you feel that content like this makes you think, observe the world more attentively and see beyond the surface, subscribing to the channel is a simple way to continue this exchange. Here, each story is chosen to provoke awareness, not just momentary impact. If this message touched you in any way, leave a comment saying so. This message was for me. This helps to understand who is on this side, who walked together until the end, and who also recognized themselves in this journey. And if throughout the video you felt a connection with the story, the rhythm, the reflection, a like is just a silent way of saying that it made sense. There's a video over here that complements this topic and delves even deeper into the idea of plot twists, choices, and consequences. Click and continue watching it.